Have you ever felt like this when you post something with no reactions? It's not the best, is it? For the best reactions, you need the best, most unique product or idea. And when it comes to cookies, Mo Sweets is the best there is. Whether you buy some for yourself or you gift them to others, you'll always get the perfect reaction. With these cookies, you get the love of a homemade item with the professional quality of a seasoned baker. They make the perfect post and the perfect treat. For more reactions, order more sweets. Order online at mosweetstx.com and find them on Facebook and Instagram. Salvador Dali once said, "Intelligence without ambition is a bird without wings." If that's true, hire ambitious management and make the smart choice to watch your dreams soar. If you're an up-and-coming business person and don't know where to start, if you need a tax professional, or if you just want a free evaluation of your current life policy, please reach out to Amber Avis and watch your dreams take flight. She's available on social media. Hello and welcome to the Beat the Clock podcast. My name is Michelle Rubio-Garcia. I am a podcaster based out of Laredo, Texas, and I am here to help you grow. This is a very goal-oriented podcast which tackles the question of what we can do to be better. We do so by timing ourselves at 45 minutes. And then I ask 3 questions to our guests. 1, who were you? 2, who are you? And 3, who will you be? And then if we need to probe a little deeper, I'm here for that. And that's my job. And then at the end, we wrap it up with a question for the listeners. So the guest will offer advice. How can listeners avoid clocking out of life? And with that, we'll come to find personal revelations. We'll come to find out some very honest confessions. And through that, I hope you can feel empowered that your dreams are just as important as theirs. So I want to thank you. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, thank you for giving it a shot and welcome to the BTC community. And if you're coming back, thank you for the support in that way. Welcome back to the BTC community. We're all here for each other. At least that's the vision of this thing anyways. And so without further ado, we're going to introduce our first guest. Last week, I modeled the structure by myself. It was like a confessional, but now we're going to step in and start bringing in guests every week. So the first guest is Ricky Ray Hernandez. So let me go ahead and read what he gave me. Ricardo Ray Hernandez is an educator within the inner city of San Antonio, Texas. He teaches music to children from kindergarten to 5th grade. And throughout the past decade, he has collaborated with various musicians from Austin to Laredo, Texas. The music groups that he is currently creating with is La 45, I'm sorry if I butchered that, a Tejano band, Bear Brass, a brass band merging NOLA and San Antonio sound, and Volcan, which specializes in Latin or cumbia music. Ricardo, also known as Ricky Ray, will soon be launching a podcast expressing poetry and reflection of the unfolding events we see today. The name is tentative, but he invites listeners on thought journeys along with his guests to further seek understanding and insights from various perspectives. So as you can see, this guy is artistic in nature, and so we'll see how he fares with this challenge, right? The 45-minute deadline is an exercise of life. So can we maximize our time? And you'll come to find that even when people do mess it up, they still get something out of it. And even post-interview, we'll talk about how that experience was. And it's really interesting. It's turning into a nice little thought experiment. And so maybe question yourselves. If someone doesn't make the countdown, right? How do you feel, right? You go, oh. And if you feel that, then that's the mentality you should apply to your own life, right? If you're wasting time in your life, you should feel that tension. In that tension, we rise. So again, let's see how Ricky fares. And let's celebrate that we have 4 ads now. Woo! Celebrate the small victories, guys. It's just as important as the big ones. All of the little victories amount to great success. And again, bear with me, please. There was a lot of file trouble with this one, so you're living the growing pains with me. So that's what I'm gonna say as a disclaimer. If you hear little noises and stuff, I promise I tried my best to edit it out. But again, you're seeing an authentic journey here, and that authentic journey of me is posting this out there, even though I know it sounds bad. But again, it's about failing forward and still trying your best. For example, I wanted to film a little bit more professional, I guess you can say, but I had 6 interviews over the past 2 days, so it's been crazy. And so here we go with Ricky with editing issues. Who cares? Let's just see what we have to say to each other, and let's see how you guys as listeners can grow. So without further ado, let's see if Ricky beats the clock. Timer, and here we go. So this is Beat the Clock, episode 1. As you can see, there's an energy here with Mr. Ricky Ray Hernandez. Welcome to the show.
Woo! Good to see ya.
I am very excited to see you too. And we were just talking about it before while we were prepping, but we didn't even talk in high school, but we've known each other since high school.
I was just exciting. Isn't it funny? Like, who would have thought? As much as high school to everyone. If you're in high school, if you're listening, high school is the world to you, and respectfully, right?
Right.
And when you're out of that and you're out of the nest and you start flapping, you start hitting the trees, you start feeling the air and all of that good stuff. High school and all the faces become a connected memory instead of a individual memory, and you're in that memory, right? And I bet I am like that to you, and it's really cool to like the first time I saw you again, like in terms of the virtual webs was I was holding one of my quarantine talks. I don't even know what really that is. It's more to me like an invitation to family, invitation to family and friends, checking in, like, hey, how are you doing? What's it like for you? I'm very curious your thoughts in how suddenly life changed with this lockdown and this quarantine. And I would pose like a thread of a thought, how you viewed Fridays. Isn't it interesting how Fridays, there's even a restaurant called Thank God It's Fridays.
Right.
Thank God's Friday. And then the way, therefore, that makes meaning for Monday. Oh, here we go. And Wednesday is like, oh, that we are in the grind, y'all. And Friday, it's that same cycle. And all of a sudden, that meaning is gone. And then we're witnessing the ever so present day that's not limited to a label called Friday and the feeling of Friday and how we plan on Friday. So it's like one of my friends who hosts every Friday, speaking of a virtual meditation, and he dropped a nugget, and ever since it's been planted in my head. I really like the way he phrased it in terms of talking about time. And like he said, in terms of time, where even is time?
Yeah.
If you pause for a second, it's like, then where even is Friday? Where even is Monday, and Wednesday, and all the way we perceive time? So, what a miracle to witness the majesty of time, in every moment. And
I'm so glad you brought that up because, again, something that brought us together was your quarantine talks. I don't know why. I just felt very curious. And so let me get to that. I'm going to put everybody's label on the promo, but then underneath, like you said, behind the label, there's always something more. So something that I put for you was curious observer, right? And yes, I mean, look at you. I think this is the interview we're going to have to rein it in because we were going like straight fire last time. So yeah, creating this podcast is really, really interesting for me in terms of time as well because I'm pre-recording all of these interviews, right? Like I have like 5 this week. And so I have them like in the past, but then I'm holding them to release them in the future. So
you're witnessing, you're the arbiter of the mediating of time.
but it's so weird. Like it's really tripping me out because when I did dance team, it was like teach a routine, try out for the routine, clean the routine, perform the routine. Next, like it was that cycle. And this cycle, creating this podcast, shows me that it's all over the place. I mean, really, right? And even those moments in the past that are in the past for me are new for somebody else when I release it to them. Those
May I share a
moments.
thought on that?
Yeah.
I'm so curious how much this internet thing that's really not ours, but it creates this portal. This phrase has been just echoing in my head. It's created a portal of allowance that was only limited to, like, let's go back in our smaller bodies, right, kids, and watching TV. Those portals of allowance. You had to go to Los Angeles. You had to go to New York. You had to go places to get on the portal, but we didn't call it portal. It was a TV, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so interesting how much what's being realized in the turn of this century, really,
Mm-hmm.
uh, how much this portal has been allowed for all who have access to a portal. We still culturally, habitually, conditionally still call this thing right here a phone. Wait,
Mm-hmm.
it's not a phone. Remember when it used to be on the wall and you had to, like, you were connected to it by a wire? And by the way, you couldn't have another call. That was the portal. It was
Right.
so right here, and this is beyond the phone. I want to make up a word, magnanimously, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
um, Drastic of a difference. So it's like what you're experiencing. I wonder how much of that was a limited experience behind those who handled these portals, these movies, these TV shows, right? These news outlets. All of that has now been realized in the hands of those who decide. So it's really cool to hear you express your following of those decisions, that it leads you to realize that you don't have to go all of those places. It's just a matter of deciding into it. And to me, just watching that is like, that never existed before. And what a miracle time it really is. I know there's a lot of things going on, but because there's so many more portals, it's like what used to be darkness and information is now, uh, there's a casting of light above all of the truths,
Yes.
especially things that we don't want to hear and want to know about. And
Agreed.
but you know what? It's just a beginning. Why is it? It shouldn't be a shock, perhaps. It's more like, okay, this is the reality.
Mm-hmm.
And what do we do with it? It's You get to decide. Let's decide right now because it's here. It's here. It's just decide into it. Is that
Right. And
weird?
it's so weird because even now that I'm scheduling all these interviews and I know that release date is Friday, getting to Friday feels so long now because I'm doing so much work to release it later. Like I'm used to that linear sense of time, and right now my whole concept of time is so messed up. Like really, this podcast is challenging my views on how I view space and time.
You made me think about a thought that I don't know where I'm referencing this, but I really appreciate the frame of thought. It's when a change occurs,
Mm-hmm.
especially like this quarantine. Uh, the reason I found myself being frustrated with trying to make sense of it is with using my past to make sense of it. And when I let go of the past and look at what's here, it places me in a space where I have to realize new tools of thinking to make sense of the now. So it's like, if I were to go back, it doesn't make sense. If I were to bring the back into now, it's not going to make sense. So it's only found in this slither of a portal of, like, watching our deciding into this new reality that used to be defined by what university you go to, which there's still credibility there, of course, but it was solely. Now it's being realized that actually your decision in every, like, your decisions weave, right through the day, and like you were saying, like as you're as you're looking into Friday, you watch how the decisions offset or totally favor in towards Friday. And it's like, whoa, how, I didn't realize this was always here. So it's
Yeah,
like it creates a sense, which I love the name of beat the clock. It's like now there's a realized uh, uh, lens of perception. It raises a question: what's next? What's next?
and it also, like we were talking about before when we were chatting, it also claims victory. Like you can tap into it and you can own your moment. You don't have to wait for other external factors to influence it. Like there's urgency, there's autonomy. Like let's go, let's get it. Like that's the spirit of Beat the Clock. So this has been a
Mm.
super extended introduction. So, like I said,
Oh,
I think we're gonna have to really, really, and you and I, we were going hard. Last time we spoke, it was like a 5 minute conversation.
oh
We
my
were,
god, it was like 5 minutes, 5 minutes. I know, and it was like I respect your time, and I'm like I just have to ask a question. I even forgot what it was, but
yeah,
it certainly threaded into all these other things. It's funny.
yeah, it was like super long. So honestly, it's kind of cool to time you because we're really gonna like milk it, and we really have to prioritize what we
Let's
have
do
to
it.
get. Like
Let's
it's
beat the
funny. It's
clock.
good. Yeah. So question number one.
Hit it.
Who are you?
Who am I?
Who were you
Well,
in the past
who? Oh,
that you
who
let
was I?
go of? You said.
I'm gonna. The what helps me understand that question is thinking in terms of like I'm a teacher, right? Like I know I'm kind of jumping around here, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and what and thinking from the lenses of like what do I want my kids to know, right?
Mm-hmm.
As in like I want them to know because they're gonna face these things in the world. So it's like a realization which is why it's a who I was kind of thing. So I don't know if I articulated that well, but here I guess I'll try to answer it.
Yeah,
I
because
was
when you introduce yourself to your students, you don't say the whole you, right? You leave parts out. So by leaving parts out, you create a new you, right? You create a new expectation, a new identity. So yeah, that's a
and what
good.
allows me to have the experiences with them is because of letting myself walk into the me now. So
Right.
to answer who I was someone who used to and still struggles with who used to place as an anchor in thinking as a like a value like the most important thing is how motivated you are, and through time watching how much of that helps, it's more of a state of mind. But if it's solely that, there's no foundation, so it's like you're kind of just floating across time. I'm being general here, but that's kind of the I can capture the past like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what's allowed me to snap out of that is really being a teacher, watching these
Mm-hmm.
kids, watching how much I was not that long ago in their shoes, watching their conversations, interactions, how they view their hierarchies, and how they recognize certain uh, nuances that perhaps they don't even realize they notice, but I notice. And I realize that they're going to be people like you and me who are looking for information, trying to understand. Like that's going to be them. Right now, they're not seeking to understand. They're under the wings of their family, parents, circumstances, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
That's their uh, that's their thinking. So it's like, oh, I can actually speak to that right now, and I even tell them like I'm talking. A lot of the times when I talk to them, I even tell them like I'm about to talk to your future self. They listen closely, and they're like, "Whoa, sir." It's kind of funny, but
And you teach
they zone
elementary,
in.
right?
Yes, I teach kinder through fifth. Kinder through fifth. I see all of the all of the students in the elementary school as their music teacher.
Cool. So that's
I
like that's a deep thing to say, But I mean, I do a similar thing because I make my seniors the first day of senior year, I make them
Yeah.
write a letter to their future selves when they're graduating. So they think it's super random, but I ask them questions. I go, what's your favorite song right now? Who's your best friend? What are your goals for the end of the year? Stuff like that. And I mean, I dropped them off during this quarantine because they weren't going to get the proper send off, right? And they were so thankful. And I think even them, they were like, "Ma'am, looking back, like I'm just so glad you made us write that because they're looking at it with new eyes, in a new being, in a new state of mind." And it's crazy how media, whether it's written or oral or visual, whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it,
Scripted. Yeah.
it's they're little moments of time and little capsules. And if we trap them and we kind of
Yes.
reflect on them, then we can learn.
And I appreciate you saying that because what you just said, capsules, perfectly captures what I've been trying to understand with like the writing that I've been allowing myself. I have to say it like that because I'm not forcing myself. I'm allowing myself to uh, like just pick up the pencil, pick up your little book that you've looked at like for a year, and you're like, I should start writing, and like I should just write something. I'm like, what am I gonna write? And since the lockdown, I just allowed myself to, well, let me walk into this thought, and it's crazy. Now it's like full of all these different, you know, notes and observations, and you know, and what happened afterwards was in Laredo, right? Shout out to Laredo Border Slam, which is a poetry slam that
Hey, are you in San Antonio right now, or are you in Laredo? I didn't even ask.
I'm in San Antonio. Yes, I
Oh,
teach here
okay,
in
cool.
San Antonio.
See, we're like we're going on a journey here, you and I. We're about
Yeah,
to do.
in like, check this out. In terms of time, we already talked about where even is it. In terms of space, really, where even is it? And this virtual reality is shining attention how we perceive, right?
Hmm.
Like, what used to be limited to like you have to go to this part of the country to kind of do this kind of work. This thing has certainly bridged uh, those kinds of experiences in a whole other paradigm.
Right, because I mean, if I didn't have Zoom with you, we would be in two different spaces. But then the moment that we come together in a Zoom call, it's one space. We're in the same room, quote unquote, right?
Mm,
So I don't know.
mm.
This quarantine's unlocking some interesting revelations, and I guess I vibed with you because of that. I felt like you were kind of getting in tune with that kind of thinking as well. So
You
let me
know,
just really quickly
go for it.
because I really feel we're gonna run out of time.
Yes, go for it. Go for it.
Okay, so yes, you said you were a music teacher. Now you were in
Mm,
band, right? And I was in the drill team. I saw you. I saw your energy, whatever.
mm.
When you said you were gonna pursue a music career, did anyone give you any flack for it?
Yes or no? So the yes is my deciding into a music career was specifically jazz studies. Really, my experience into college, full disclosure, was like I didn't do it responsibly. Like
Mhm.
I'm lucky in terms of I happened to, I was practicing. I competed in the states, and I placed. And they make a band with like the top, players, and
Whoop,
in high school.
whoop.
Oh yeah, yeah. But looking back at it, it's like it's really all cute. It really is. And
Right.
I, to with the fullest of respects to all the students who are doing their thing, because, for me, it's like I don't have someone to teach me. I would solicit for someone to teach me, and I would have to, beg my parents to take me to San Antonio. But aside from that, um, I was in doing this clinic in high school, and the person leading the clinic was the jazz studies professor at Texas State. And shout out to Freddie Mendoza. He just said, "Hey man," and he's a real like very tough kind of guy. Like, "Hey man, pretty good. Might want to look into trying out for Texas State. Think it could be pretty good. I'm like, but me? Because I used to think that scholarships, this, I don't know why I thought this. It was, I'll never forget, I was a sophomore. This is imprinted in my head. I forgot the Skylar Scott, I think was his name. You may remember. Um, uh, you
The
must have
football
been
player.
football player, yes.
Yes.
I never forget. I happened to be doing a schedule thing, it was at the beginning of the year, and I heard the counselors, all of them, say, "Skyler Scott got this scholarship. He got the scholarship from Duke," and I was like, "Oh, so universities look for you." Got it. That was my thinking, and that's it. That was in my head. When I'm a senior, I'm like, "Oh, they're gonna be looking for you, right?"
Right.
Well, flash forward, I'm thinking, oh, they're going to look for me. No one's looking. And here's this guy saying, hey, you should go for it. And to me, I'm like, there's the connection. I'm going to do whatever it takes to, make the audition. I didn't even apply to any university. That was just like the thing I was looking for. And I realized I'm missing out on all these scholarships. I'm like, okay, there's a lot more things going on. And even my counselor like suggested to me, and like, I'm so sorry. I just thought you were already doing that, and because you're always doing things, and in my head, because in full respect, Miss Castillo, she's taking care of so many kids. When you're a
Right.
student, you don't realize that. You just think, oh, they're just taking care of me.
Yeah.
Full disclosure, that was my thinking. Certainly, who I was, right? Going back to that question, things just happen, right?
Right.
Things just sequentially unfold, and you just kind of like, okay, you go over there, all right. That's just. Oh, so going back to the degree thing. So yes, I got flack because like, what are you gonna do with the jazz studies? And I started thinking, well, that's true. It's not the 20s, it's not the 30s. It's a whole other world. I can't be thinking about I have to be the best jazzer in the world. Full as respects to those who do, because they have figured out other ways. And I certainly wasn't certain that that's exactly what I wanted. And when I would sit in other, like in the like education for music seminars, and I would watch them, do their simulations, and the professors that so excellent. I was just like, oh, look at these master educators. The things they're saying, the things that they see, I'm like, I want to see that too. I want to know how can I be part of this program. And they noticed that, and Dr. Cabot recruited me, and so ever since I was all in, right? I was looking forward to being a teacher for younger, people, and where I
You got
got
the
the
youngest.
most, yeah, and that's where I got the biggest like awakening that there's a difference between the elementary, because you have to see them all. Everyone has to see you, whether they like it or not. and and of course, when you're in middle school and high school, they get to pick. That's kind of the basic framework of thinking. And something about the fact that everyone has to see you, and I get to see a whole spectrum of individual little people, like future little people. It's something about that, just which I've seen now, is exactly what I wanted to be a part of. And so going back to the earlier conversation about, it's I just find this portal of allowance within each other, in sharing forecasts of what could be, and seeing all the things that they have within themselves, so they could even notice it themselves, like, oh yeah, I am pretty good. I'm like, but not just because I'm just saying because it's a pretty thing to say. It's more like, when the opportunity comes to acknowledge those things, let's pinpoint that into a forever memory, so when you're older you can always have that as a reference. That's my thinking. And
Yeah,
well,
and
anyway,
I
I don't
mean
know what was a
that was what you said. I mean, you exercised that when you heard what was his name, the one that told you you need to try out.
Yeah. Freddie Mendoza.
Well, Mendoza gave you that portal of allowance to allow you to lean in to your identity right now, right? Without that little
Yeah.
moment, you would not have probably gone that route. I mean, so there's a lot of power in being
Mhm.
very present, right? And again, that's what Beat the Clock stands for. If we were to not time this, we would lollygag. We'd be like, ha ha. We would go, and then we would waste so many precious seconds. But the vision of this is that 45 seconds, like every single word matters. If you do not articulate yourself fast enough, you might not finish the interview because I'm cutting it at 45 flat. So there's that sense of, again, urgency and being present in the room, quote unquote.
It
Because,
incentivizes clarity.
right, like if you're not clear, then we're wasting too much time and then you're not going to make the time of the interview. So, very interesting concept. I mean, it came to me, but I didn't realize what I was onto until I started making it. And now I'm like, whoa, this is kind of super metaphysical, right? So, okay,
Well,
jumping into the
I
second question.
appreciate. Okay, just one real quick. I want to
Yeah,
say that I
yeah,
appreciate you sharing that because full disclaimer, full disclosure, like I've been feeling a sense of resistance even walking into allowing myself to invite conversation to the point where when I just allowed myself, I find myself meeting all kinds of different people looking for others to also explore thoughts and it's I think perhaps it's ingrained in us deep, like I'm going to say the word spiritually
mm-hmm.
into within ourselves to recognize times to communicate with the intent towards clarity, especially when things get very muddy and cluttered and with information. So certainly, this is a time. Uh, I've just been just speaking it out. This is an era of clarity. Clarity shall
Agreed.
be will be witnessed.
Truth shall be witnessed, right?
Ooh, ooh, with clarity.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so second question. We're kind of like jumping around time, so to speak, with this
Go for it.
interview, but it's the first one. It's okay. Who are you now?
I would say I am one who is that recognizes where certain things are unclear in my thinking or even in my like what's the word scope of just looking out metaphorically, not just looking with my eyes but just with the experience of life, right? Like looking into life, uh, allowing myself to be curious where there's things that are unclear
Mm-hmm.
that perhaps need to be acknowledged, because I've certainly experienced when I allow things that are unclear accumulate, it certainly becomes a sense of fatigue and affects my life. So it's become like a fun seeking of where are things that are unclear. And of course, I'm speaking in a very general sense, right? But that's kind of where that's how I think about a lot of things. You know, where are there things that are unclear and how can I invite clarity? And perhaps that may take the shape of, you know, inviting other people to, inviting other viewpoints or certain, like for education, like how is it that you do those things so well? Because to me, that's unclear. Can you help me understand that? Uh, I
Yeah,
hope
and
I'm
look,
answering that question.
that goes perfectly with the many notes that I have. Remember, I told you like I have 1,000 right now. I got some thoughts from the previous interview
Mm.
that is after yours. So again, very
Oh yeah,
mind-boggling. I recorded it earlier than you, but I'm posting yours first. It's so
that's
interesting to
awesome.
me. Yeah. So okay.
What a
Um,
dance.
so yeah. So I'm telling you, my mind's all over the place. So what you're saying is something that I was reminded of when watching Bruce Lee's Be Water. Have you seen the documentary?
Oh, it's a vague memory, but I know which one you're talking about.
Well, in it he says that, and that's like the shortest, most profound sentence I've heard. Right. So all
Mm,
knowledge is self knowledge, and so
mm.
that was very mind blowing to me. And now that you say that, collaborating with other people, seeking clarity in your own life, I just think that that's like a really big component that everybody's missing out on because we're too prideful, right? We're too prideful to admit what we don't know. And when you think about it, everybody processes information differently. So even though we both got taught the same content, we're going to process it differently. So really, everybody walking around is like their own little world. And so
Oh yes.
when you're asking another person what they think, you're being curious enough to step into their world, right? And when they give
Yeah,
it to
it's
you
like, can you help
back,
me see what you see? Yes.
yeah, and when you go back, it's like you guys are in each other's worlds.
And
And
I think that's where that word that perhaps is like to me, certainly for the longest time until recently, like this year, or maybe even after the lockdown, the word oral tradition, like it just sounds like, oh, that's an old thing that people used to do when they didn't write stuff. Like, no, of course they wrote stuff, but in terms of how it was understood, it was an oral tradition in terms of it, like music. These are just hunks of metal. It's just a bunch of drums, but when you sound them a certain way, what's created is a witnessing of something that is abstract that a tree perhaps can't understand, like a person, or God can't understand like a person, and the us people could recognize as like, oh, that's grooving, or that's jamming, or it's like, oh, it's hip hop, or it's like that's salsa. That's all these we put labels on top of it. And this space, when it comes to linguistics, right? It's like through the uttering of this thing and
mhm.
the flapping of our tongue, all of a sudden there's an understanding that can be experienced. I'm like, that's a miracle. Like it's so normal to the
Uh-huh.
point where even we even can get like, oh, whatever. It could even get what's the word? There can be a devalue in how we experience that utterance, because certainly there's, you know, things that are said that aren't valuable, but just the fact that it is there alone is a miracle. So I don't know how I got there. Oh, you were talking about
Clarity. You were talking about clarity, and then we were saying how everyone's a world, a universe. And you're saying,
there you go.
we add labels, we add labels. Even for me, like again, I'm flying off of the juices of the previous interview, which was very, very eye opening. And so,
Mm.
and that's
Can't wait to see it.
a central part of my book. I swear, it's like everything you're saying. I know that. I mean, I'm just gonna say it. I know that God's working and weaving everything together, because the entire content of my book is like all of the interviews that I'm covering so far. So it's crazy to me. But anyways,
Wow, it's
um,
self manifesting. Mm-hmm.
yeah. So one of my friends that I met when I traveled to Greece, she told me, when my husband and I were leaving and we were giving our final, sentiments, she said, "You guys are the kindest people I've ever met. You're so kind." And even though she meant very, like, well, obviously, um, that bothered me, because I was so used to being funny, quote unquote. Like that was my identifier for myself. So the fact that a stranger over the course of 10 days could tell me that I was kind instead of funny really revolutionized my thinking. And I honestly think I took it back into the classroom, and I
Mm.
think it informed my pedagogy. And I think that's why so many students, even last night, the salutatorian of the school, she was my dancer slash student. She's the first word she said, "Miss Rubio is the kindest." And so me listening to these labels that other people are telling me, I'm like, that's who I really
In,
am. It's not funny. Like
indicators.
funny was a coping mechanism for me. And I talked about that in the first interview,
Woo!
right? Or the first self interview, because it was just me. But I used to use humor all the time to deflect my insecurities. And so when everybody was saying, "You're very kind, you're so kind," that was very kind of you, your kind words. It made me look at myself a little bit differently. And labels started changing it in my own head about myself.
Mm. So it's like, in terms of identity, where even is it? It's like you could
Right.
apply that even there, right?
Yeah.
Because
So
at the
it's
end of
really,
the day, it's like, go for it.
I mean, that's really interesting that you're saying just being curious allows a lot of information to get to you. And all the information that we're receiving is exclusive to us. So we can learn about ourselves and we can contextualize our identity from that information that we're receiving.
I'm happy you say that, because what a time where
Mm-hmm.
we must realize the dependency that we actually are on each other.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but you're all the way over there, or oh, but you do this kind of line of work. Oh, but you're this and that and this and that. Oh, but you're too young, you're too old. Like, whoa, hold on. We're all experiencing, right? That's a unifying factor.
Mm-hmm.
And there certainly is a shaping of experience what transmutes through this portal, right? That's a miracle. Just this portal, it certainly plays a factor in our experience. So it's like, what used to do that before this certainly was what? That glass box.
Mm-hmm.
Or really plasma, but before that, right? It was a glass box. And before that was this also a box that emitted sound, radio. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that played a factor in our experience. So it's like, well, okay, now let's flash forward into the now.
Mm-hmm.
And there certainly is a lot of information being transmitted into people's experiences, to the fact where, rest in peace, Mr. Floyd, right? That horrible situation that occurred.
Agreed.
How much this experience played a factor in the whole country. Like,
world.
wow, the whole world. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's just, if you just look at it from like the logistical standpoint, like, what a miracle this is.
Yes,
And
I
also,
agree.
let's raise concerns for our own selves, how that just the platform itself, not the event, just the way, the matter of fact in which this our experiences are that intimate in being what's the word, our experiences are so intimately tied with this thing. That's what I'm trying to say.
And I
And so it's
mean,
like, well,
if you're talking about doing things that are for us and for our betterment, it's such a pivotal time in history right now, because we're normally too distracted to be united, and the only way it's going to work is when we're all like in tune to the same wavelength of thought, and all of us are caring about that issue. So that's the pockets for change right there.
allow me to slip this in, because I feel the time is starting to crunch here. So I've actually
8 minutes. 8 minutes.
8 minutes. All right. I actually participated in going to the protests, and I happened, like, full disclosure, I was doing a car maintenance, right, in New Braunfels, and my sister lives there. I'm like, well, let me hang out with my sister and let's go downtown, and we happen to stumble upon a major protest. I'm like, oh wow, it's here. My brain was like, let's wrap up the school year, work. That's my brain, and I hear all these things happen. I see these clips circulating, and so it was already at the time where it was wrapping up, and I see this protest, beautiful display, very heartfelt, well choreographed even, and you even saw varying other viewpoints. The way they displayed was their varying views, flags that represents that, and they were talking, exchanging water. It was like, yes, they're talking, it's good, and it's in plain sight. So many cars, a lot of honking, and it was heartfelt. Out of curiosity, after hanging out with my sister, I swing by at night, not a peep, gentle nightlife. I head home back to San Antonio, and I'm like, well, let me take a peek. A friend of mine mentioned that, there was a peaceful protest that previous weekend, and they all went home. All right, everyone's good, and they found out the following day that there was havoc that was occurring, and it was not them. And it was interesting to take note of that. So I figured, well, let me swing by. It's already going to be 10. Let's see what's up. Flash forward. I feel the pressure. Oh my goodness. Perhaps we should open up this can of worms, and that was experienced. And I'm gonna cut a lot of things for the sake of time, but I'm gonna flash forward to I interviewed people there, right? And it was cool to watch how these sharp, very smart young people there. They're in their 20s, and the talk was just like what why are we here kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And let's just say in walking, we happen to intersect with seemingly the opposing view, like an older couple who happen to be white, and they're like in their 60s, and they happen to ask these younger young folk, right? And they asked them what happened, and they said they were shooting at us, and we're just peacefully protesting, and then they said, well, it's because you guys need to be home, and like you need it's late, and it's like, whoa. I saw the perception, like, it's because you're white, you don't understand. I saw that in those kids, and I'm like, and I respectfully mean kids, but like I saw like older people,
Mm-hmm.
and like there's these young people, so it's like,
Mm-hmm.
whoa, we're about to fight here. And I felt the interjection to say, may I ask a question to everyone? Is it fair for all of us to acknowledge that what happened with rest in peace, Mr. Floyd, that was wrong? And then what unfolded, of course, I'm gonna leave everyone hanging here, was the transition from to hugs. Like it was I had to record. I recorded all this, by the way, so
Wow.
perhaps I should release this, right? Speaking in
Yeah.
terms of time, I'm like, wow, I didn't realize that it was good that I hit record. Um, and they're hugging, and there's clarification. There was like, yeah, you're right. Perhaps because other people aren't as peaceful, perhaps that's why it makes sense that they put a curfew, even though all of us, we don't agree with, but there are people abusing that, and it's unfortunate to the people expressing, especially these young people who feel and are willing to go and express. And I even shared with them earlier in the day, there was a massive protest, and it was beautifully displayed. Perhaps that's also a good idea. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm leaving out a lot of things. So if anyone's wondering, but there's perhaps we should unpack. Perhaps your friends can tell you, if they want to hear more.
I mean, okay, I'm gonna like try to summarize the third question. So with
Go for it.
that anecdote, we'll leave him on a cliffhanger and we'll guide him to the future self, which is gonna be your podcast. You said you also want to start one, or you want to start some sort of um, revealing system, right? That's what I'll call it. Whether it's a poem you said or something like that. So that's like a preview, right? Because we've been like going ham. So I'm gonna try to
Yeah,
wrap it up.
go for it.
But that's a preview of what they can get from you because you will go. I mean, we were on it the other day and our 5 minutes turned into an hour easily. So,
Yeah.
okay, I'm leaving that final question. Who will you be?
Okay.
You left a cliffhanger. You've been talking a lot, and they kind of get your vibe now in the present. So they need to tune into your next product to see what you'll be in the future, right? I'm wrapping it up. So here we go.
Okay.
Final
Cool.
question. So this is the one that's directly, I mean, we're talking a lot, right? But directly to our listeners. What can they do to avoid clocking out of life? Because again, we've been talking about concepts of space and time and how everything's so blurry right now. But how can they seek clarity? If you want, we want to go on the Ricky Ray vibe. How can they seek clarity and make the most of their time? And you have a minute and a half to do that.
Okay. Right before you clock out, because we're even is time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps what matters the most is what we can see in front of us. So it's like right before, it's like we can actually see that line where we crossed and we clocked out. So it's like, how about we recognize it as an indicator of like, oh, there's that line. I face it all the time. And I'm like, how about expand that, realize that it's a small portal that's about to shut, and expand it into by walking into it. Perhaps the walking into is like, what is the one small thing that allows that to not get close to that line? Like, for example, if it's working out, it's like, well, I'm as soon as I wake up, I'm gonna, like, for me, shout out to Orange Theory Fitness. I hit I hit that link, and especially if I didn't schedule to go, it's free on YouTube. I just hit that link, and I just know when I'm out of it after that hour, that line has been expanded. That line is shoved away, but it's an ever encroaching line. So it's like, it's all about, oh, I get it. It's about how can I feed in front the line, put things in front of that line so that line is ever so distant. Perhaps that's, I'm not sure if it's clear.
We didn't even get to cover what we talked about in our final conversation. I wanted to talk about the dog thing. I wanted to talk about the grape thing that you said. Oh my God, we're missing out on so much. But I'm going to wrap it up. You can talk about that on your stuff. I'm here to support you. I love how your brain works, which is why you're setting the bar on this beat the clock thing. So thank you so much, Ricky. I love to dialogue with you. And we're wrapping it up on episode 1 of this podcast. We're clocking out here, but don't.
And they can find me on Instagram. But I interrupted. I'm sorry.
Oh, we missed it. Okay, go. Give them the handle real quick, and then that's it.
Instagram, Ricky Ray, woo! RICKYRAYW 5 O's.
I'll post it in the description. So it's the first one.
Sweet.
So
you can edit that out.
Yeah, you're granted a grace period. So again, thank you so much, everybody. I tried to do the slogan, but then we had the Instagram handle thrown into the universe. So again, beat the clock, episode 1. Thank you, Ricky. We're clocking out here, but don't clock out in your own. Are you visiting Laredo, Texas in the near future? Just because you visit this beautiful border city doesn't mean you have to limit yourself to a few corporate hotels. Book 1802 Social House to unlock the possibilities. You can cozy up in a suite for a unique downtown experience. You could rent office space to create your own history while working in a historic home. Or you could rent out the space for your passion projects. The possibilities are endless. Book your stay now through Airbnb or find them on Facebook. Confidence, style, and artistry. Unrivaled dance education yields exceptional dance results, and this is the LSCD experience. The Laredo School of Contemporary Dance has established a nearly decade-long tradition of excellence, setting itself apart from local and national dance studios by offering a unique, unrivaled curriculum of diverse dance styles. And now the question is, are you ready to experience it? Find them on Facebook and register for summer courses now.